Hey everyone, so welcome to the elections webinar. We'll be getting started in a few minutes, so just hang tight. All right, so we'll be getting started. Thanks for everyone for attending this webinar. So we're going to be talking about elections and the process of how it goes. Yeah, so now we'll introduce our host. So hi, I'm Annie. I'm your executive assistant for the Laws and Regulations Committee. I'm from UC Berkeley, and I'm a fourth-year integrative biology major.
Hi, my name is Sarah Chen. I am the Central Liaison for the Laws and Regulations Committee, and I'm from Cal Poly Pomona. I'm a fourth-year electrical engineer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Samantha Pham. I am the Northern Liaison. I am a second-year pre-pharmacy student at the University of the Pacific.
Okay, so we'll actually be getting started. So this is our table of contents. So today we're going to be talking, we just did introduction of hosts, and then we're going to be talking about pre-elections. So this is basically all the necessary preparations that the current executive board mainly needs to do to get ready for elections. And then we'll also be talking about hosting elections, so how to run nominations and then elections, and all the process and steps that you go ahead and do it. And then we'll also be sharing some additional tips about hosting elections. And then running for office. So we're going to be giving a breakdown of all the elected board positions, presidents, administrative vice presidents, service vice presidents, treasurers, and secretaries. And so basically we'll be explaining all the duties of each elected board position. And then we also will be talking about like preparing to run for office. So this basically is including like what it means to run for a certain position, being prepared for a speech, being nominated, and also preparing for caucus. If you didn't really understand a lot of what I just said, don't worry because that's why you're here, and we'll be covering it in this webinar. And then last but not least, we'll be doing Q&A, so you can answer or we can answer any questions that you might have to the best of our ability. Okay. So we'll go ahead and start talking about pre-elections. So basically, first part is you want to plan your elections. So you want to choose the dates that you want to have your nominations and elections. Usually nominations is recommended to be at least 1 week prior to elections so that the candidates can be prepared and the board can be prepared to hold elections. So usually these are held during your general meeting dates, especially nominations, since it shouldn't take too long, and so you can always have like half a general meeting and then nominations. But with elections, it's a little bit more difficult since it usually takes longer, as you have 5 positions and maybe multiple people running. And with all the speeches and caucuses, it might take 2 to 3 hours. Um, so maybe not have your general meeting on that day. But it's recommended for you to have elections on the same day as your general meeting so that the same number of people can come. And then, according to our bylaws as well, club elections must be held at least 2 weeks before district convention. And so, district convention this year is March 22nd to the 24th. But we do suggest clubs to do it sooner so that officers can get time to transition and the new board can be trained kind of by the old board. And that way, the new board can know that they can go to district convention and get more training there since they'll be having training workshops. Um, yeah. And then we'll also be talking about how to advertise elections. So basically, your members should be very aware of your elections timeline. So when is nominations, when is elections. You always want to utilize social media and emails and your general meetings to advertise election dates and procedures so that members can be prepared. Make sure to always advertise to your dues paid membership since they are the ones that play a huge role because they are the ones that will be voting for the next elected board. And you also do need a certain amount of dues paid members at your election, which is called quorum. But we'll talk about that more later in this webinar. And then additionally, make sure to advertise attire. So we do usually recommend business professional attire for elections, since it is a little bit more like professional and you want to give that feel, that vibe. And then the last thing is you want to be available to your members. So a lot of schools right now are offering office hours or one-on-ones hosted by their elected board members, so that the general members can ask questions and figure out what position they want to run for. Also, if they do personally message you, you want to try your best to answer their questions so that they can know what they're getting into. And then to all the members who are interested in running for a position, make sure to not be too shy to ask your questions since you want to know what you're getting into and what is required of you and what is needed. Yeah. And so then now we'll be moving on to Sarah, who will talk about more and what happens during elections.
All right. So, hosting elections. It is essential for clubs to follow the correct procedures during elections to not only have the process flow smoothly, but also to ensure everything is valid. Starting off with nominations, this is a time where the members decide who will be on the ballot on election day by nominating their peers for different e-board positions. And so for nominations must happen at least a week before elections. Many clubs have nominations during club meetings, and in addition to that, clubs also have it more than once, so that way there are more opportunities for members to be nominated. A crucial point to add before I continue is that those who are nominating and being nominated has to be dues paid members. Alright, now how to properly nominate someone. There is no official way, but here is a template that you can use if your club does not have a specific way they prefer you to do so. So I, Sarah Chen, nominate Annie Chen for the position of secretary. And with that, this needs to be seconded by another member. If it is not seconded, it does not count. Then, the nominated member can choose whether to decline or accept the nomination by saying, I, Annie Chen, respectfully decline or accept the nomination, but you have to choose one. You can't choose both. Another big thing to add is that members cannot nominate themselves. It has to be done by another member in the club. And now we're on election day. This is when everything goes down. On the day of the election, your club must meet quorum to have a valid election. What is quorum, you may ask? Quorum is pretty much the majority of the club, meaning you need to have half plus one of dues paid members to be present. A way to verify this is to have a sign-in sheet on the day of elections and to also have your treasurer print out your club's official list ahead of time so that way they can verify members on the spot. To explain what we mean by half plus one, here's an example. If your club has 30 dues paid members and 10 non-dues paid members, you would need 16 of the dues paid members, but they must be those who are dues paid. Why do we keep emphasizing dues paid? Well, that's because they are official members in your club who pay to be a member and have a say in their leadership for the next year. Only dues paid members can vote because if anybody can vote, a candidate could technically bring in all of their friends from outside and have them vote for them. As for that, we highly encourage you to advertise heavily to your dues paid members because their attendance is incredibly important for your club to have valid election. And again, the reason for a quorum is because elections should be the representative of the membership. Next, there is a chance right before caucus for another round of nominations. This is so members who plan to run off the floor have an opportunity if they weren't nominated a week before or at the previous days for nominations. As per usual, they still need to be nominated by another member and have it seconded. If they are not nominated and seconded, they cannot run. Votes must be conducted by ballot. Our bylaws require that voting at elections must be conducted by ballot, so make sure you have them available for your members. The reason for this is not only does this help the process remain anonymous, it also is the easiest process for whomever is the one to keep count of the votes. Again, only dues paid members are allowed to receive a ballot. Now, next as board members, you will be responsible for moderating the elections, as well as timing the speech/caucus time limit that you set at the beginning of the elections. This means it will be your responsibility to decline inappropriate or unreasonable questions during caucus. For example, members can't ask about the candidate's religion or political stance. In addition, if no one in the audience is asking questions, be prepared to have some questions for the candidate. And again, only dues paid members are allowed to ask the candidate questions. Other important things to keep in mind is that running opponents cannot be in the same room. So when one is caucusing, the other must be escorted out the room until the other's caucus time is over. Then they can be escorted back in. In addition, caucus time can be extended by any dues paid member by stating, I, Sarah Chen, move to extend the caucus time by 2 minutes, and this motion must be seconded. And moving on is that for the cycle of elections, there is a process on how this goes, and this should be followed for every single election. First, you open the floor for the president's nominations. Then you conduct the presidential election. And from there, members vote and collect ballots and count ballots. And you're supposed to announce the winner of the president. Then you can move on to the next position, which would be the vice president of admin. You also open the floor for nominations. Then from there, you conduct the vice president election, and then members vote, you collect the ballots and continue, and then you also have to announce the winner again. And from there, it cycles down to the next position would be the vice president of service, secretary, and treasurer. So remember, everyone, to follow the cycle for your elections because this is the way it should be happening. And now that I gone over the basics of nomination, Sammy will further talk about the other processes that can happen during elections.
Hello. So within the elections process, we do have the trickle-down system. Essentially, this system allows members who did not get elected in the position that they initially ran for to still be eligible to run for other positions as long as they are nominated to do so. So for example, if someone ran for president and lost, they could still be nominated in the next category for vice president and so on and so forth. So next, we'll be going over through a brief overview of all the executive board positions available to run for starting with the position of the president. Just as a quick note, every board is different. These are all more of a general task each position is responsible for. So I highly recommend asking your current board officers for more information. So for president, as president, you're not only the face of the club, but basically oversees all the club's components. This includes several responsibilities such as providing guidance for the board and club, running all board and general meetings, as well as acting as the main liaison between your club to your school's campus, division, and district. Moving on, we have the position of Vice President of Administration, or VPA. As VPA, your responsibilities closely tie into the president's, where you also act as a major liaison between your club and campus, division, and district, and also you fill in for the president in case of absence. You're also in charge of overseeing the appointed board within your club and tend to focus on the more administrative side of Circle K. Next, we have the Vice President of Service, or VPS. As VPS, you also may fill in for the president in case of absence, but your main focus would be to find or create service events and advertise the events to your club members. Then if your club has an appointed service chair or service committee, the VPS tends to oversee that as well. So now we'll move on to the position of secretary. As secretary, your main responsibility is to be a records keeper, so in which you record accurate accounts of all general and board meetings and submit reports such as the monthly report form or the master's record sheet to the district and international, as well as keeping track of all your club members' hours. Then lastly, we have treasurer. So as treasurer, you essentially handle all the club's administrative funds and general budget, as well as membership dues and registration fees for district events such as fall training conference or district convention. In addition, you will be planning and setting up fundraisers. If your club has an appointed fundraising chair, you'll most likely be working very closely with them to set these up. So now that we have gone through each position, you may be asking, what should I be doing to prepare to run for elections, or what should I be doing to prepare if I'm running for club office? So things that you could be doing to prepare for running for office is to talk to the current board officers. It's really as I mentioned before, all boards are different, and so if you would like to get more of a feel about the position you are considering about, please talk to your board members. Ask them questions, maybe such as oh, what exactly is your task? How's the board dynamics work? It's really helpful to talk to someone who understands the position. Next is to prepare a speech. So ask the board members how much time they'll allow for the speech and caucus. Prepare a speech before elections. I highly recommend, if elections hasn't started, if you have a position in mind right now, start your speech. Have someone listen to you, practice it and everything. It's really helpful to prepare. Next thing is ask someone to nominate you. This is actually really important since we did mention before you can't really do self-nomination. So make sure that you have someone nominating you. Since you cannot nominate yourself, you have to rely on others to do it. Ask a friend beforehand to make sure that you'll be eligible to run for office. Then after that, please prepare for a caucus. So a caucus is a short period of time after your speech where dues paid members can ask you questions regarding the position that you're running for, or in Circle K in general. So ways that you can prepare for caucus is just kind of study up and brush up on your general knowledge about the position you're running for, as well as Circle K in general. And then practice. Like they say, practice makes perfect. rehearse your speech as much as you can and know your material. Don't try to really memorize your speech verbatim is a little tip. It's much easier if you were to break it down into bullet points. And then again, referring back, understand the trickle down system. So even if you're not elected for the position that you initially ran for, you are still eligible to run for the other positions off the floor if someone nominates you. And then just like a last note, it's okay if you don't win. It's okay if you don't get the position you were hoping for. All you can do is really try your best and hope for the best. Just remember that like Circle K has a wide variety of leadership opportunities to offer. And although one door is closing, more doors will open. So just give it your best shot. And I'm sure like if something doesn't go your way, I'm sure it's going to work out for you in the end. So now Annie will be going over a recap of what has just been presented.
Yeah, so basically that was a lot of information, but we'll do a recap so that you guys can kind of get like the TLDR of it. So basically hosting elections, to reiterate, make sure to maintain a serious atmosphere, and you also want to be unbiased and fair. So with all the questions and stuff, you want to make sure you're unbiased. As the current elected board and the current board in general, you should make sure to like be serious and professional, since this is a professional thing that your club is hosting. Also, to make sure to be familiar with your election cycle and rules, whether you're a board member or a person that's running for a position, because you don't want to be caught off guard by certain questions or by things that go wrong. So the more prepared you are, the better. And then also, when you're running for office, yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so when you're running for office, you want to make sure to ask the current board. So anyone like elected board or appointed board, or you can even ask your club advisor. So you want to make sure to make sure to ask them questions so you can keep calm during caucus. You can even ask them to like give you questions to practice with. And you want to know that like you have a good understanding of all the caucus rules and systems. And then make sure to not forget about the trickle down system, because it is really important, especially if you're really interested in other positions as well, and you want to be ready to like run for those positions. Because after you run for one position and say you didn't get it, if you trickle down to the next position, you have to do another speech and another caucus. So you don't want to be caught off guard with certain positions. And then, so yeah, even though we didn't cover running for district elections in this webinar, and this is mostly about club elections, we will be having a candidates training session for the district in both North and the South. So if you have any more questions about district board elections, you can contact your lieutenant governor about it, or you can also talk to people or like in your club. And then, for example, the Foothill LTG is having a webinar tomorrow. So yeah, yeah, and then now we'll be moving on to Q&A. So make sure to put your questions into the link that is on the slide right now. So tinyurl.com/elections questions 19, and we'll be answering questions. Okay, so one of the questions is, does a dues paid member have to be present in order to be nominated? So no, they don't have to be present at the nominations. So they can be nominated still, and after it's second, the president will usually tell them that they have been nominated and ask them if they accept or decline the nomination.
All right. Another question that was asked was, what are some potential questions that will be asked in caucus as VP? So a question that was asked when I ran back in the day was, what would you do if two of your appointed board members have a conflict? And from there, based off of like, we would just have to answer based off of what you think or that would resolve the conflict easily. And another question would also be to like, how would you manage your time being that you are gonna be dealing with both E-board and A-board? And again, it's up to you on how you would like to answer, but those are two questions that could potentially be asked.
Another question we were asked is how should you prepare for an election? So specifically for the speech and caucus. Also, how do you get over stage fright? So for speech and caucus, focus on stating your qualifications and then plan for the upcoming term. Exactly like what would you want to do differently? What would you want to remain the same? And then for caucus, like I said before, it's just kind of just brush up on general knowledge of what position you are applying for, as well as Circle K in general. What helps is like you could ask past board members who also ran for elections, asking like, oh, what kind of questions did you receive during caucus as well? And then to overcome stage fright, for stage fright, practice is the best thing that you can do, because the more comfortable you are with the information, it's a lot easier to present. Things that you can do could be like having a friend listen in on your speech, or even just talking in front of a mirror. Just a lot of practice helps you be more comfortable.
And then another question that we had was, what do you do if you're quorum on election day? So for that situation, you would have to reschedule. So you'd have to reschedule or wait for dues paid members to attend. And in the past, clubs have had to reschedule before because of not reaching quorum. And so this is why we talked about advertising to your dues paid membership, especially since you want to make sure that you hit quorum in order to have valid elections. So yeah, advertisement is very important in this case. Okay, and then another question is, may I request district endorsement during elections? So yes, this is during elections is a time that you want to ask for district endorsement if you are running for a district board position.
All right. A question is, how do you go about preparing for a platform for one speech? What is your personal experience doing that? Well, in the past, when running, the best way is to really just talk to the current officer who you're running, or the position that you're running for. They can give you a lot of feedback or advice on what has happened in the past and what you can do in the future. My personal experience would be back when I ran for elected board, I actually was interested in all positions, but I wanted to sum it down to probably two. And so I actually spoke to every single e-board officer during that year, and they all gave me a lot of good feedback on what our club can improve on, what mistakes they've made that we can avoid in the future, and how to kind of like talk to the club or show them that you're really interested in the position and improving the club and helping it grow.
Another question that was asked would be, if no one is running for a position, what do we do with that position? If a position is left vacant, then normally the board will appoint in the next term.
So the question was asked again about getting endorsement from other schools in your division. It should be just Oh, actually, yes. You can get endorsement from other schools in the division if you are running for district executive board. And from that, also, if you are running for lieutenant governor, you're not allowed to.
Another question that was asked, referring back to, say, if a position is vacant, for example, what happens if a club ends up having no one that is willing to step up for the position of treasurer? Can we have the president do both president and treasurer? If the position is vacant and you do not have someone to appoint, then the president can step up and also do the position as well.
Okay, so a question was asked, who typically totals up the ballots and what percentage of votes do you need to win? And how many no confident votes are required to turn down a candidate? So the person who normally totals the ballots is either your club advisor, a Kiwanis advisor, or an unbiased vote, meaning someone who just isn't voting during that elections. And the percentage of votes you need to win is pretty much majority, so at least more than half. And then how many no confidence votes are required to turn down a candidate would be the same, the majority, so pretty much half plus one of the half plus one that you need there. Another question is, what do you do if someone is running unopposed for voting? You still need to have a ballot and vote either no confidence or the person. And there is also the option where you could have a unanimous vote, but it has to be it has to be brought up by a dues paid member and seconded too.
Another question is, see, let's say a question. I had ran for president last year, but wasn't elected. I agreed to run for vice president administration, only to not be voted again. I worry that it might be the same story for this year. Should I make an attempt again? I would say go for it. I understand, like, every year is different. Every year is different. Every election is different. And if you truly want to be on board and run for it again, I say go for it. And if anything, if you do worry about it being the same result again, just reflect back and just think like, oh, what can I have done differently? What could I have done better? Just overall, just if you really believe that you want this position, I say go for it.
Yeah, and then one more question that we had was, can executive officers nominate people? So yes, they can nominate people even if they're running the elections.
Question that was asked is, what is no confidence? And basically it's abstaining from the votes. So meaning you're saying that you wouldn't want the person to be your next board or leadership.
Okay, and then we also had a question that says, can you be nominated during nominations for district executive board or LTG, or is it just during district elections? So for district elections, you have to wait till House of Delegates to nominate people for the district board. So unfortunately, you can't do that at club elections. Okay, so one more question we had was more about the trickle-down system. So a refresher, basically the trickle-down system is something that if you run for president and you don't get it, then you can trickle down to the next position that you would like, but you have to be nominated off the floor for that position. And like we said before, you want to be prepared for the questions and for the speech in caucus if you are planning on trickling down just as backup.
Another question we got is Membership Development and Education Care, or MD&E, not an executive position that will be elected at elections? No, according to the bylaws, MD&E is only an appointed board position.
Okay, and then another question that we had was, what should I put on my literature? Are there any rules or restrictions for literature? So assuming that this question is asking about club elections, rules and restrictions for the literature are usually set by the board. So you want to ask them what their rules are so that you have a valid literature.
Alright, a question that was asked is, where can I find position descriptions and more info about each e-board position? So in our district bylaws and any club bylaws, it actually does state a little bit more about what each e-board position does. And you can find these on our district website, which is cnhcirclek.org or circlek.org for the international website.
We also got the question of, can you make amendments to the club bylaws at elections, and how would you go about that? So, you can make amendments to the club bylaws at any general meeting. The board/member needs to propose it to the club, and then the dues paid members will take a vote on it a few weeks later.
Okay, so another question that we had is, what is the proper way to rescind a nomination? So once you nominate a member and if they accept it, it can't be rescinded. So another question, can you be nominated for endorsement during club elections for district executive board or LTG, or is it just during elections? So it can be either. It doesn't even have to be at nominations or elections. It can be at general meeting. It's just good to do it during elections because more dues paid members will show up to vote for it. Wait, okay, so we were talking about how to rescind a nomination before. So if the member who didn't accept the nomination, if they want to not be nominated or not run anymore, they can just drop, but they have to notify the board of their drop.
Another question we had is, does someone, such as the current secretary, have to record everything that happens during nomination? For example, who's nominated, who's second? Generally, secretaries should keep an accurate minutes or like records of what does happen at any meeting.
Okay. My question is, can I run for executive board position and also serve on a district committee? If assuming this question is about club executive board, then yeah, you can serve on a district committee as well.
Alright, someone asked if someone pays dues on election day, can they run or vote? Technically yes, because then you would be an official dues paid member.
We also got the question is, what is the role for someone from a visiting club during another's election? Do we just observe it as it happens? What about for those who have been effectively an unofficial honorary member by attending the electing club's events for over a year? In both cases, you are still the observer. So you would just like as other meeting general meetings you have attended, you would just be a visiting member from another club, observing, not necessarily taking part, such as like voting during their elections.
So a question that was asked was, I was wondering, would I be judged for declining a request? No, honestly, if you don't have the time or you don't have the commitment to do so, it's fine that you are declining a request to run for a position, or if someone nominates you, you can't do it, you can't do it. You have to take care of yourself first and understand your boundaries. Okay, So there's a question asked, when will the optional position of Vice President of Recruitment and Retention be active? So the Recruitment and Orientation Officer is a new optional position that was adopted at the International Convention, and that each club can adopt it as is needed. So
Another question we got would be, is there any amount of an A board position you should try to have before running for a position on E board? There isn't necessarily a certain amount of appointed board experiences you should try having before running for a position on executive board. For example, I do know many members who actually went from like general member to executive board. It is good to have some sort of experience, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like appointed board position. It could be from any other group, club, organization work that you have done.
Yeah, regarding the last question, it also depends on what size club you are. Because I know for different size clubs, they have different amount of members. So there could be always like people who are general members running for elective board. So no, there's no limit. And then we do recommend like experience though, especially if you're running for president. So that way you kind of know how it is run. Okay, and then there's a question, who typically totals up the ballots, and what percent of the votes do you need to win? How many no confident votes are required to turn down a candidate? So usually, it's usually counted by an advisor who's present or a lieutenant governor that counts the votes. And then a candidate needs a majority of votes to win, which is 51%. So this is 51% of the number of dues paid members that are there. So if no candidate gets 51%, then there will be a revote, or the top two candidates will move on to a revote. So if it's only two candidates, or if it's more than two candidates, it'll be 51%. If not, then the top two will move on for another vote. And then with the no confidence, it's the same thing. It has to be 51% for someone to win.
alright. Okay, so a question that was asked is, when seeking district endorsement from clubs within the division, are candidates allowed to explain their campaign? What are the limits to this? And no, you are not allowed to discuss your campaign at all. If you do, you'll be disqualified. You must stick to talking about your qualifications only.
Okay, and then So the question is, what if no one wants to run or be nominated for the position of president? So basically, the next board would either have to have someone step up, or they can appoint one. Okay, so this is the final call for questions. If you guys have any questions, you can either comment it in the YouTube channel, or you can also send in more questions through the tiny URL.
So someone in the chat asked, what if the club does not have enough dues paid members within an election? Would that be an invalid election? Yes, it would be, and you guys would have to reschedule it until enough dues paid members attend.
Okay, so there's another question. So is there a GPA requirement for positions? No, but some schools do have a minimum GPA requirement to be an active member in their bylaws. But it's very uncommon. So you would have to check with your own club bylaws and your executive board. Yeah. Are club okay? So another question is: are clubs required to meet quorum for their elections? So yes, they are required to meet quorum. If you cannot hit quorum, then you have to reschedule your elections, or you have to wait for active members or dues paid members to show up. So yeah, final emphasis on advertising. Make sure to always advertise so that you have enough dues paid members at your elections for quorum. Okay, so we are now going to end this elections webinar. Thank you everyone for attending. If you have any more questions, you can always ask the Laws and Regulations Committee any questions that you have, and we'll try to answer them as promptly as possible. And if you have any more questions, you can also email Wayne at ck.waynechain@gmail.com. And then if you came to this webinar, thank you so much. There's a sign-in link right there, so make sure to sign in to get your hours. Yeah, have a great rest of your night. Thank you.